Welcome back to our weekly Bhagavad Gita and yoga philosophy studies. I'm here with my friends and my fellow Bhakti yogi, Jagai Prabhu, and we are diving into the Bhagavad Gita and discussing so much of the rich philosophy that's in there. We've just been going through chapter by chapter, verse by verse. And so today we will pick up where we left off, which I believe is somewhere still in chapter 3.
It is. We didn't get far last time, did we?
Right. I have it marked, so.
Oh, you do? What is it?
We were on chapter 3. We ended around text 29. We got through, so we're at text 30, which is a great verse. And I feel like on Tuesday, if you caught our Bhakti Sadhana, we talked about surrender. And it just seems to be my personal theme this week that Krishna wants me to work on. So here we are starting at text 30, which starts off with surrendering. So chapter 3, verse 30. And before we begin, we'll open up with our invocations. Jagai, would you like to lead those since you do
Sure.
those?
Riley, do you know how to find chapter 3, text 30? Yes. Yeah.
Welcome, Max. Good to see you.
Oh, Max, how are you? So, Riley, whenever we start, if you go to page 1 of the introduction, which is literally page 1 of the book, we say these a few of these introductory verses. Sometimes we say all of them, but today we'll just say this first one. So you see, I'm here on page 1. I pulled up the same book that you have. See, it's a 1 here, and then this first verse is a Sanskrit prayer to the Guru. Okay, so you just read along. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with a torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him or her or whoever. Okay, whatever. So we're at 3:30. Dharma, you want to start since this is your week?
Sure. So we were talking about, just to give a little context for this verse, because I think context is everything. And Arjuna is having a discussion with Krishna. Well, Krishna is talking to Arjuna, and he's been telling him to sort of do his works, to do his prescribed duties, but to do them with devotion, which in essence is, you can live a material life and just be in the material world and the modes of nature and the gunas, which he talks about here, or you can spiritualize the material. It's all spiritual, we just forget. So through our act of devotion, we re-spiritualize all of our material activities. And so he's talking about doing our works from a place of devotion, a place from the heart. And so text 30, chapter 3. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. So Arjuna is in a battle. He is actually in the middle of the battlefield. So if you look at the cover of your Bhagavad Gita, you'll see a picture of the battlefield. And you'll see the chariot, and it has Krishna and Arjuna on it. And they're having this discussion. And Arjuna does not want to fight the fight, although he is leading this battle. He has found himself at the forefront of a battle he doesn't really want to fight. And so surrendering all your works unto me, we talked about last week, with full knowledge of me, and what this meant of full knowledge, or what kind of knowledge. What is he talking about when he uses this word and this concept, full knowledge of me? And yeah, without any desire for profit, so not being attached to the outcome, which he's already discussed, with no claims to proprietorship, which means not taking ownership of it. I did this, I created this, this is mine, it belongs to me, this kind of um, languaging. And then this last one, and free from lethargy. Stop feeling sorry for yourself and get out there and go fight. Right? That lethargy that comes with sort of, I think of like the malaise that comes with just the dread of having to do something that we don't want to do. And so we become heavy and lethargic, which is tamasic energy, that tamasic nature that we all experience and are all under the influence of. And so Krishna is offering a way to do that here. So thoughts, anyone? Jagai?
Oh, I have teenage boys, and if I say, I want you to take out the garbage and clean your room. I told one of my teenage boys yesterday to clean his room 5 times before he did it. 5 times. Now, if I said to him, if you get your room cleaned in the next 5 minutes, I'll give you $1,000. Would it happen?
Absolutely.
100%. So what makes the lethargy?
Is that there's no direct reward for, right there, or the reward isn't something that just really gets us lit up about it.
So Krishna says, equipoised in happiness or distress, profit and loss, happiness, honor and dishonor. That means that when it's loss and dishonor and it's not happiness, if we have lethargy, it's because we're attached to the result. Make sense?
Yeah, we're still entangled with our expectations or hopes of what the outcome is going to be, the attachment to the result.
Yeah, like as a yoga teacher, if you show up for a class and there's 50 eager students, you're happy. If you show up to the class and there's 2 and they're kind of sleepy, you're not that happy because you're attached to having a successful class. Means you have written in your mind what a successful class looks like. But as a yoga teacher, you should be just as enthusiastic to the 2 as to the 50 as to 50,000, right?
Yep. 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 And that is a real experience for teachers, yoga teachers, people who have clients. You get in a bunch of signups, you're all excited, and you got only like 2 or 3 people signed up. That dread is there because we're already lost in the entanglement of, well, I thought it was going to turn out this way and it didn't. So that means A, B, C, or D about me.
Yeah. You start thinking, I suck as a teacher. Nobody likes me, right? All this nonsense, all because, as Krishna says here, surrender yourself to divinity. Give yourself to divinity. All your works, and with full knowledge, without profit and loss, no claims to proprietorship, no lethargy, fight. Do your class, do your job, go and tell your kid to clean the room for the 6th time, go to your crappy job, like do your business, do your job.
I feel like life gives us a lot of opportunities to put this into practice. And it doesn't mean that because we have ample opportunities that we're going to get it right the first time, or that we can just flip that switch inside us. It's something that has to grow within us in our embracing and connecting with the idea that we're not doing it for our own personal gain. Although that may be a result that comes of it, we're not doing it for that. And we live in a material world, so we are doing things for money. But you put the meaning before the money. You put the meaning before, and to me, that's what surrender is you put the meat, like, why do I continue to tell my kids the same things over and over? Clean your room, clean your room. Like there's a meaning that I want them to grasp in life. And for me, going through the action again and again, even though, parenting can cause lots of lethargy because you are really attached to the outcome of your children, and you should be. But when we're in that struggle, when we're feeling that lethargy or that resistant energy, conflict energy, I think when we can recognize that there's meaning why we do it. And so it gives us a why that motivates us, that is bigger than the lethargy. But that takes, I think, it takes practice. And a lot of these teachings that Krishna is giving Arjuna, I feel like some of them are ninja moves, like they're master level ninja moves. And so you don't just become a ninja master overnight. You have to practice and practice and practice little by little, so you start with the small things. Start with the small, easier things. And then as you get stronger at that, you're better able for the bigger things in life to also flex that muscle, that attitudinal muscle of, okay, like there's a bigger reason why I'm here than for 50 people to show up. I get that experience a lot. I'll teach my 8:30 a.m. class, and sometimes there's 2 or 3 people there. And then I go to the bluff and there's 150, 200 people there, like on the same day, back to back.
Yeah.
And when you do that enough, you just start to go, it just is what it is. Like, I'm just showing up to where I'm supposed to be. And there's people there, if there's a small group or there's a large group, my purpose that's driving me is to serve the people that are in front of me, no matter the number, because that's my service to Krishna, is to show up in that way, my service to source. Anyone else have thoughts or comments on this? Welcome to the room, Bhakta Ed and Carly. It's good to have you both here. But before we continue on, what thoughts, feelings, concerns?
What do you think, Riley, being a newcomer with your camera on?
I know I never have my camera on Zoom. Hi, everyone. But I love this space and I'm really grateful to be a newcomer and to feel safe with y'all. So thanks for having me. I was sitting this morning as my desk angel Seva duties, and I was getting into the intro, and I was just like, oh, wow. This is it. So I've been really already sitting with this book a lot today, even though I just picked it up today. And I'm with you, Teacher Dharma, on the surrender, this eclipse and retrograde and having little ones. Lots of surrendering. I've been doing my homework as well. I'm in the yoga teacher training class. So lots of learning, lots of surrendering to this process. My whole life is shifting to match the internal shifting. So receiving the message of surrender.
Nice. Anyone else? Ashriel, what's your thoughts?
I was going to say, Azrael, you might as well go before he calls on you.
Ninja moves. These are ninja moves for sure. When you said that, I was like, oh yeah, that feels like it's hitting home. Yeah, that's where I'm at, just trying to take it all in, and I appreciate you sharing the grace and like to give ourselves grace throughout the process of learning these, because sometimes I read these verses and I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing it all wrong. So I appreciate being here and hearing your experiences, Dharma and Jagai, because you guys have been studying these for so much longer, and it helps to hear your experiences and your humanness throughout, because it makes it feel like, okay, no, wait, maybe I can take some of this stuff on and try. And yeah, so that's where I'm at.
How about you, Max?
I mean, it's definitely very personally relatable for me. Lethargy is something I deal with as a procrastinator. When I have a big decision, I find myself stuck between the two, kind of like Arjuna, and being like, "Do I have to fight?" Even though I signed up for it, I was like, This is not." um, so um, yeah, I'm really, it's very meaningful to me, and to give it all back to Krishna. I love the reminder of being here, in congregation with you all, because it's always a reminder of how sweet and supportive Krishna's love really is, and it's never a burden. It's always nice to be here.
I like to often remind myself to keep fighting the good fight. Like, I don't like fighting. I don't like the idea of fighting. But the nature of the world is as such. And we can fight the good fight, or we can be caught up fighting in the bad fight. And so when I hear these words, like just get up and fight, it makes me think of that. Like you said, Max, we signed up for this, whatever it is, just get up and fight that good fight, because there's meaning to it. And Krishna gives us so much to have meaning behind what we're doing. Anyone else? Carly, you want to share? You got your camera on. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, I'm late to showing and I'm sort of drawing here off camera. So I was looking away and had my camera off. From what I caught since I joined late, and just really to reflect on everyone else's comments, I'm caught between, I feel a big moment of change that I'm also signed up for, and feeling like magnetized to, but also incredibly tired, because it requires a really big shift in a lot of how I spend my time and my focus. And there are moments where I feel like perfectly in alignment and like everything makes sense. And then there are moments where like everything feels like way too much, and I totally forget about all of the things I can do to like breathe through a moment and ground myself. And so I turn to like the lethargy or the shutting away from everything, instead of sort of breaking through, I think, to another side, which always feels good. It's like when you follow through with something you've committed to because it's a good idea and it's going to feel good. And then just the getting there is the hardest part, but you always know you feel better afterward. I feel like I'm in that space, but in like a much larger sense, with a lot of big changes like in my life. So a lot of what you're all saying is really resonating with me and making me feel like it's a good reminder. We go through this as humans all the time, big or small.
Thank you for that share. Jagai, I don't know if you want to unpack a little bit with this part of the verse where it says, with full knowledge of me.
Sure. So if we think about, which, some of us are very new, but some of us have been around, like Max is he's been doing this now for years. Krishna, really the essence of the Bhagavad Gita is not anything different than what we're already doing in life. Like there's no like list of crazy things we have to accept and do. Krishna will eventually tell Arjuna, after so many chapters, do as you're doing, but with knowledge, right? With knowledge of why you're doing it. And in that place, your concurrent actions will become spiritualized. So why would that make sense? Like, what would be the difference between just doing the action or doing the action with knowledge, right? Why would that be different? So let's think of something as mundane as like an escort. I could call an escort and a beautiful human would come to my door. We go have a wonderful evening, talk, laugh, everything. Then we'd spend the night together. And And the next day, I give them the money and they leave. The intention, the knowledge is very different than if I had the same experience, but with somebody who loved me, right? Like my fiance who loves me. The actions look exactly the same, but the intention is wildly different.
Mhm.
So to live your current life with knowledge, in quotes, which means intention. And how do you get that intention? By philosophizing, studying, thinking, coming to a conclusion, and working with intention is wildly different than doing it without the knowledge or without the intention. So Arjuna, who wants to give up the fight because he has profit in mind, Krishna is now telling him, do the same thing you were going to do, but do it with intention for divinity. And then if you're a success, you offer that to divinity. If you're a failure, it was for divinity anyways. It wasn't about you. And so knowledge, you can use a synonym as intention. What do you think about that, Dharma?
I like that analogy. I thought you were going to go somewhere slightly different with it, in the sense that, and I think this is another layer to it of knowledge of like, say you didn't know that it was an escort, or you didn't know that having an escort meant a certain arrangement. You didn't know the terrain, and so you end up getting attached after that one night. But that's not the terrain that you were on, but you're bringing in these expectations into that field of play, and so therefore we end up suffering and all that stuff. So even in the intention, I think that's a really important part. I think some of the foundational work that Krishna has set up is understanding the terrain that we're on, knowing our position in the world. And that is like a first level of knowledge of just understanding your soul in a human body. All this material stuff is temporary, it's always changing. So just know that going into it, that's a good place to start. And then you're in it, you're there, you have to interact with all that stuff. But if you do it with intentionality, you do it with a connection with your source, whatever that may be, then it changes the experience that you have, not necessarily the material things that you have to go through, but the experiences that you have as you are going through those material things.
Another example, which I've said before, but one that I like is, let's say we were walking, let's say Azriel and I were just walking down the street, and Azriel has no idea who Dharma is. And we're walking, and she says, oh, look at that painting, looks pretty nice. And I look and I say, oh, my friend Dharma painted that painting, and it means this and it means that, and she's a great person, and we've been friends for a long time. And I go on and on and on and on. And now Azriel, who saw the painting with no knowledge, no understanding, will see it in a completely different light simply because of what I've said.
Mm-hmm.
I've said, it's a friend of mine, they're a great person, they do this, the purpose behind the painting is this, it means this, it means that. And with that knowledge, that intention, you'll look at the same painting with a completely different eye, a different purpose. And so when Krishna says, do your duty with knowledge, it means intention, feeling, love, and actual knowledge of who Krishna is, what divinity is, studying Bhagavad Gita, as opposed to just getting out there and starting hacking heads off and with no real intention, no purpose. Make sense?
Yeah, or with whatever intentions and purpose your ego has trumped up for you.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, shall we move on to text 31?
Yay.
Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. This is a doozy.
Yeah.
Injunctions is just popping out at me like, what are these injunctions? And
Yeah.
And it's interesting, free from the bondage of fruitive actions, meaning you can take fruitive action and be free from the bondage.
Yeah, so especially for some of the new people, I want you to recognize something about the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is written in Sanskrit, and the Sanskrit language is poetry. Okay, so give me a poet that you like.
Rumi.
Let's Rumi. Okay, imagine if you knew another language, let's say German, and you had to translate Rumi to German. In the translation, there's no way around it. You're going to lose some of the artistry and the poetry of it. Like Shakespeare, if you were to try to translate it, it doesn't work because it's written in the language, and the language itself carries a certain amount of artistry that you can use to beautify the actual language that you're speaking. So English, which is heavily influenced by Judeo-Christian theology, we use certain words that don't translate, but we don't have the option to do something else. Like the word God doesn't translate into Sanskrit as being the same. So injunction in English sounds like a list of rules, right? Because that's what we know of an injunction, like a law. The Sanskrit says, Mattam idam nityam. From the Vedic understanding, those axioms of truth which are eternal, those eternalities, nityam. So, like, what would be an eternal understanding that we have as humans? One piece of knowledge that we know about all people are equal. Murdering innocent is bad. Forcing yourself on somebody else is bad karma. We can come up with some eternal nityams that are not particularly injunctions. We just know them as being truthful, right? Me kidnapping a woman and tying her up, that's not correct. You don't need a law to tell me that, right?
Or
You don't,
like the self-evident truths.
yeah, it's a self-evident truth. So in this verse, though the word is called an injunction, it's in the Sanskrit, it's called a nityam, which would be a self-evident, eternal truth. Does that make sense? So to understand those self-evident, eternal truths, those is what Krishna is saying, as opposed to an injunction like 1, don't be bad, 2, don't steal things, 3, don't say the F word. Like, that's not what Krishna is saying.
I think of them as like, there's laws of nature, and it just when things are flowing in harmony with the laws of nature, there is a flourishing that happens. And when we are not in harmony with the laws of nature, then we are where we are today. And I think that there are sort of, and even that word law, I think we have such an association with like it's a rule. But it's like the law of gravity. It's not a rule, it's just a law, that it's just a thing that exists that we experience. And so I think of them as divine laws, like the laws of divinity, or just there's the laws of nature that are part of this material world. And then beyond that, there are laws of divinity that aren't rules. They're just, when we are in alignment with those laws, they're basically the functionality, like the architecture of the functionality of things that maintain the order. And so when we're aligned with that, there's more order. When we're not aligned with it, there is more chaos.
Exactly. Brilliant. So that, in this case, for brevity, Prabhupada is using the word injunction.
All right. So following these sort of divine laws, doing our duty. I like what you were saying about Krishna saying like, just Arjuna, whatever you were gonna do, go do it. Like live, like you're in your life is happening, you're having your karmic experience that you are here to experience. Like live it, show up and be a part of it, but with this knowledge and thinking of me in service to me, do that. So here he's saying, follow these teachings faithfully without envy. Envy of who? Just envy in general?
Yeah, so again, and this is why we study Bhagavad Gita in groups and discuss these things. This is this is 700 verses, which is a distillation, like a little espresso shot of hundreds of Upanishads, the Vedic teachings, the Vedanta Sutra, the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is 18 cantos, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, down to 700 verses. So it's essential, right? So things are brief, and so it's not always exactly clear without that larger understanding. Envy in English means what?
Wanting what someone else has.
Mm-hmm. And so in this, anusuyantaha, without envy. It means without without begrudgingly doing it.
Like wishing you were in someone else's position and not yours.
Yeah. So if you're fighting, like if you're saying, yeah, I'm gonna do, like imagine if you had a partner, somebody who loves you, and then they cook you a meal begrudgingly. That's not nice. Right? I cooked you dinner. That's not nice. So in this case, envy, think of doing it begrudgingly. So don't do it begrudgingly. Just do your work free from being like this feeling like, I don't know, begrudging. How else do you use this word?
Yeah, like just the dread of like, ugh, I have to
Like
do
resentful.
resentful. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Having some like,
well, think of, I don't know, think of like a Buddhist monk who sits in an ashram and follows all these rules and practices and is very dedicated and very transcendental to this kind of austere life. And then look at a prisoner who's forced to follow the rules that they don't really want to follow, right? Both of them are living an ascetic life. One does not want to do it, but they're doing it. So Krishna here is saying, follow my injunctions, meaning follow the true divine rules of material nature, the axioms of a pure life, which will bring you happiness, not begrudgingly, with heart, like just do it peacefully. And then by doing that, one becomes freed from the attachment of this material world. Does that make sense?
Okay, so free from the bondage of fruitive actions, meaning when we have to engage in actions that are going to bear fruit, there is naturally, due to the laws of material nature, a bondage that happens. We're already like bound to the activity. There's a bondage in the mind of, I hope I get this, or I hope this doesn't happen. So by not doing things begrudgingly, it frees us from the entanglement that comes with having to do the fruitive actions.
Yeah, because we're attached to something else. So think about if you have a friend who has a mansion, right? And they ask you to house sit. So you go up and you stay in the mansion and you enjoy the mansion. You watch the TV, you go in the jacuzzi, you take the sauna, you lay in the big bed. You're enjoying the mansion, right? But it's not yours, and you know that. So if, I don't know, a rock comes smashing through the window, you fix it, but you're not going to be attached. It's not your window. You're just going to get it all cleaned up and put it back, but you're not freaking out over it, right? So this life is like house sitting. We're house sitting our own life. Instead of being attached to everything, we just move through the motions of it, enjoying it. It's all good, happy, ups, downs, no problem, because it's temporary. Like if you went to a friend's house who had an eviction notice on their front door, and when you walk in, they're painting the walls and they're going to make it all nice. And you're like, you know, you're getting evicted. And they're like, oh, but that's in a week from now. And so they're painting and they're going to redo the floors. You think you're not clued into the natural law that's going on here. And the law is you're going to be evicted. So just keep your house clean, keep it cool, and leave when you're ready. So it's the same kind of thing. There's natural laws, there's natural rules. Be peaceful, follow them, and you won't become bound and struggle. That same person now, when they get evicted, they're going to freak out because they spent all this time and effort on the apartment that they got kicked out of, right? So that struggle, that attachment is not there when we recognize that we're like house sitting. That make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? I saw a few chuckles from Azrael.
She liked the house sitting analogy. That one landed. All right, let's do text 32 and then someone else can read after that. But those who, out of envy, disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled, and ruined in their endeavors for perfection.
Yeah.
Something that I like about yoga philosophy is, these are sort of, it's like, it's all a computer game, and these are sort of the rules of the game. And they're not there to punish anybody. It's just how the game is designed so that you have a certain experience, right? And, if you follow the rules, then you progress in the game. If you're not following the rules, you're just like going in circles. It's over and over and over and over. And so it's not that Krishna is punishing anybody. It's our own doing. This is the situation that we end up in when we make the choice to show up one way or show up a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like smoking, right? Smoking cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
You can smoke. You may enjoy it, but you would see, if you see somebody smoking cigarettes and like, oh, aren't these guys, you want to try one? I just started this new thing, I'm smoking cigarettes. You think, yeah, you shouldn't do that. That's not good for you. You could get cancer and die. Oh, you're so negative, or this and that. No, I'm actually telling you the truth. This is like factual. So, but they are fooled by their own desires and inability to accept good instruction. It has nothing to do with being negative or being a fault finder. It's just the truth, right? Mm-hmm. And so Krishna, from a much higher level, is looking at us and saying the same thing, but we're just attached to our little world, What do you think about that?
I think it's spot on. Azrael, you got your hand up?
I really like your analogy of the video game. Because I've noticed in my life that I will continue to like make the same mistake and almost like play that same level over and over and over again until then I learn from the mistake, or not even, it doesn't even have to be a mistake necessarily, but like you'll continue to like encounter a same partner or something, if you haven't worked through certain things within yourself and like boundaries and things like that. So like the universe has a way of bringing those up continuously until you like have the knowledge, and then you don't make that same mistake again, or the choices, the same choices, or yeah. So that's where my mind was thinking about all of this. I really like that analogy a lot because it like really made it clear for me, because I was always terrible at video games. Like terrible. So I would be stuck playing the same level over and over again because I was like, I don't really care about this. My cousins loved video games, and so that like really hit home for me.
Nice. Yep. We make choices and we learn from our choices. I like how you were kind of hesitating on the word mistake. It's just there, we make choices and we call them mistakes, but I think Oprah says a mistake is just an opportunity to do it again. It's a mistake. You get the choice again. So until you learn and you make the more optimal choice for yourself so that you can progress rather than going in circles or feeling like you're going backwards. But yeah, choice. Just, we make choices and we learn from our choices, or hopefully we do. All right, who would like to read the next 3 verses?
Ashria.
Okay, text 33. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature. For everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the 3 modes. What can repression accomplish?
Ah,
Mm.
verse.
What does that mean?
So we spoke about material nature that everyone, I guess, inherits when coming into this body in this form here. So like my tastes and preferences, or like my material nature is going to be different than each one of yours, depending on karma and all of those other factors that I suppose are from the 3 modes. But I'm a little bit, so like I understand that like you act according to that, and that's kind of like inherent within you. But I'm a little confused with the question. What can repression accomplish? So like repressing those. Oh, okay. So like repressing those, your own nature. So it would be like not just giving into that sense pleasure.
Well, what is it that Arjuna wants to do?
He wants to not fight.
And Arjuna is a Kshatriya.
How does this relate to that?
He's a warrior. He sure is that he is a warrior. He's not like, a businessman that, shows up to work every day and has really nice soft hands because he's not out working with the weapons, like he is a warrior. It is in his nature, his body, his mentality, his inclinations are all wired in a sense to play the player in the video game as a warrior. And so what good does it do to repress that? Because he just doesn't want to fight. I don't want to do this, so I'm just not going to be a warrior. What good does it do what does that accomplish when we repress our nature?
Think of, let's say there's a special forces Marine sniper who's been on 4 tours of duty, and there's a kindergarten teacher. Can you switch them?
Would be very interesting. Be a funny
Would
TV show.
would that be right?
Job swapping.
I do that shows. Why can't you switch it? Why can't you just follow Krishna's rules and then just switch them?
Because we all have a nature. That's what makes us so unique and so diverse, and this experience, as dynamic as it is we all have a material nature
Yeah.
to us,
So,
right?
so
And
yeah, Krishna's saying that even if you follow the rules of divinity, and you're very connected to divinity, it doesn't change your external material nature of your body.
so it doesn't mean that as soon as you decide to be spiritual and meditate more, that like you should give everything up and be a swami.
No.
Right? Or whatever in our minds we sort of romanticize this notion of what it means to be liberated and renounced and give everything up. Two people living very different lives can be practicing the same thing, like you were talking about, although it would be sort of an inverted version of the monk and the prisoner. It could be sort of like the mother and the swami. A mom is living a material life and accumulating more and more material possessions and having to go and do fruitive activities to make money to support her children, her household, and her family. And the Swami has renounced everything and given everybody up and everything up and owns nothing and is celibate and lives, but both through the practice of devotion can be practicing the same approaches on the inside, even though the material lives look different because of the nature of who they are. Right. And even on a more practical level, too, I think like not just your nature, like we all have a constitution. Like in Ayurveda, they start with Sankhya philosophy, Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti is all matter, all material nature. And in Ayurveda, we all have our own Prakriti, our own constitution, our own unique mix of that material nature, the gunas, the elements, and we all have the five senses, but our optimal usage of those senses may also be unique to each of us, right? So we all have this constitution that we come in with. So there's that nature. But I also think like a young 19-year-old guy who is, coming into his own and being more comfortable in his manlyhood, or a woman at that age, to say, okay, well, yoga says you should be celibate. At that time of their life, that's not necessarily in their nature at that season in their life, as opposed to when we are maybe older in our 60s or 70s or 80s, it might become more of our nature because of that season of our life. But even then, for each of us, it'll still be unique based on our own personal nature, our own constitution. So there are these, I think, layers to understanding your nature and the nature of the stage of life that you're in, and not fighting what is, not fighting what is.
And there's one more little point here to take into consideration, where Krishna is also referring to the responsibility to society. So within our duties, we also have, not only for us and for divinity, our responsibility for society. So for example, imagine if there's a building, it's on fire, and there's people, and they're trying to jump out of the building, they're trying to save themselves, and the fire department show up. But at the last minute, they all decide that they're going to go to the Himalayas and meditate.
Yoga.
Do yoga. You would think that was like the worst thing they could have done at the worst possible time, because their service to society at that moment is more important than their internal desire to go to the Himalayas and chant, right? So there's an aspect of also that we have a duty to perform to society and to others, and that helps us in our connection with divinity.
And even within that, then like there's such an array of individuals. So like Radhanath Swami, it just was in his nature to take the path that he took. And although it may look like, or may have looked like at some point, how selfish, he's just isolating from the world. What good does that do anybody? He's just going to go be all realized over there and have spiritual experiences. But had he not done that, we wouldn't have the teacher that we have today. So
Yeah.
it's in his nature. I mean, I remember reading the book, and I know Radha Samya, but I'm reading the book where like he's at the train station and he meets the girl and they're maybe going to meet up the next day. And I so badly wanted him to go back and meet the girl. I'm not going to ruin it for those of you that are still reading it. But it just wasn't in his nature, right? And that may have been an anomaly according to society. Like, oh, that's, when we say these terms, like it's human nature, that is a reality. There is a human nature to us. And so Krishna is saying, don't fight. And it doesn't mean that we succumb to lower human nature. But even then, like this is in the middle of a battlefield where they're about to slaughter people.
But with purpose, there's purpose behind it.
That's right. So I'm even catching myself in saying it, like even the lower natures, what's the point? What does it accomplish rather when we repress our human nature? It causes, to me, this is like a rhetorical question in a sense, like it's just going to cause you suffering. Don't deny who you are in this lifetime and the path that you're on. Like, don't deny it. You're here. You don't like it. It's getting hard. You want to just take what you think is the easy way out and just be like, I renounce it all. I'm done. I figured it out. I'm out. And he's like, don't do that. Like, that doesn't do any good. What is that going to accomplish? Right? Because you're here, you're in it. Like, you do what you're doing, but recognize your nature as you're in it. Questions, comments, concerns? For me, the Gita brings up a lot of concerns, which is why I throw that out there. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this is concerning. I don't know, like, I'm not sure that I can do this or if this is even humanly possible. And again, Krishna's grace, like he doesn't expect us to do it perfectly.
Well, my son and I have been studying Bhagavad Gita, and today when we were studying, we were talking about how this is a philosophy. It's not a religion. So you can philosophize, and you may or may not accept everything. You may argue points. You may come to different conclusions. It all is to help bring you up, but it's not injunctions. Like, do all these things and you're good. Don't do two of them, you're bad. It's not like that. So you should it's intentional that when you read the Bhagavad Gita, you're like, oh, I don't get that. It's philosophy. You're meant to use your mind, which means you don't accept it. If you accept everything, then it's not a philosophy.
I follow this particular journalist online who happens to be a Christian, but he always emphasizes a Christian of the Black Jesus. He's a Black man, so he always likes to emphasize that. But he also says, God gave me a brain before he gave me a book. And so I like that little sort of sifting you did right there of religion and philosophy. And people have taken the philosophy and created religions around them, but these philosophies are universal. You find them in so many other cultures and their philosophies, and we get really caught up and snagged up when we create these. And I'm not saying that religion is all inherently bad. It's just a part of that terrain. Is there isn't as much room for discussion around the philosophy as it is. They just become like, these are the rules you have to follow. Otherwise, you're eternally damned in one way or another, right? But that's what I love so much about Eastern philosophy is I have a choice. When I have the knowledge and I have the information, I can choose a life. Like I was raised Mormon, and so now, my beliefs are a lot different. Like I was taught about hell and Satan and Lucifer and all these things, and that's where you end up when you aren't a good person. You don't do things the way that the book says you should do them. And as I came out of that, I came into Buddhism and more Eastern philosophies. I realized that to me, hell is what we experience in the now, right now. Hell isn't a place that you are eternally damned to. Hell is a place that you create for yourself by the choices that you make, and the ways that you live in accordance with the laws of the game that you're in. And so I liked that separation of, philosophy and religion, and how it just gets tweaked just enough to where it just creates so much extra suffering because we're not really in full knowledge. We're just following someone's rules because they deemed them to be the rules based on their interpretation of the philosophies.
Like I have a little litmus test, the difference between a religion and a philosophy. Well, okay, who spoke Bhagavad Gita?
Krishna,
When?
over 5,000 years ago.
What if a homeless guy on the corner named Jeff spoke it yesterday?
It'd just be a philosophy.
Would it be any different at all?
I mean, he's homeless, so maybe I might not. Although sometimes I've had homeless people just say things to me that I'm like, God is speaking through you right now.
Me too.
Would the truth of the philosophy be any different?
It would just be someone's philosophy.
It would be the same, right?
Yeah.
Coming from Krishna or coming from somebody else, it makes no difference. And so it's a philosophy.
That's going to be my new answer when people ask, like, oh, is yoga a religion? Is that a religion? It's like, no, this is just a philosophy, which to me means a set of concepts that you are choosing or practicing to live by. We lost Jedi, but not for long. What's your take on all of that, everyone? Anybody's got comments?
The garbage truck's right outside, so you may hear it, but I'm grateful for that separation, or you said sifting of like religion and philosophy, because it helps me to create balance as I'm receiving like information and taking the parts that resonate and like releasing what doesn't resonate. But most specifically, like when you feel super called, or at least for me personally, when I feel super called, I go all in and I like renounce everything else. So it's I like that y'all have such grounded integrations of your spiritual practices with your real human lives, because it creates a lot of guidance. Like I think Azrael said that too, like just y'all being so knowledgeable with this information and keeping this knowledge, but having a material human life and like having a phone or an Instagram account. Like I always am deactivating and reactivating because I'm like, this isn't spiritual, or this isn't like, I go back and forth and I want to throw everything away. Like I'll be celibate for a year, or like I do all the things very extreme. So I'm grateful for those, like I guess the injunctions versus like rules versus I'm not sure what the Sanskrit word is, the where is it? I lost the page.
Yanti or something like that.
Something. But I'm grateful for those kind of distinctions. Thank you.
What about you, Max? What's your thoughts?
My thought is related to what I was talking about earlier. Like when I find myself in that lethargy or procrastination, I'm for sure earning myself more karma. Like I'm having to learn that same lesson over and over and over again, which is, if I wasn't in that situation and you asked me, what do you think you would do, Max? I could probably guess, oh, the Max I know would end up doing this and going this route. If I'm listening to my gut, I kind of know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to fight it. And I'm going to go, I don't want to decide because it's convenient and comfortable for me. And so I'm earning more attachment and more karma in that way, rather than if I would just kind of know myself and know my true nature, know my encapsulation in this body, and then honor that.
Yeah, I think, knowing your nature on a physical level and, your mental level, because in Ayurveda, you have a physical constitution and you also have a mental constitution. So like with my kids, I was explaining to my older son, who is kind of built like a linebacker. He's a little bit, he's big and hefty, and his little brother is like skinny and wiry, and one has a lot more energy and the other one is a little slow to get going. And so helping him be in a place of acceptance of like, that's just your nature, bud. Like that's just the body that you're in, like there's benefits to that. You're built to be really strong. The potential for your body to be very strong is very, very high. Your brother's ability to like be as big and lift as much as you is, he's not ever going to be near you. He's wiry and scrawny, and he's just not built to be like one of those heavyweight lifters where big brother is. Little brother is built to be like a runner and play sports where he's running around a lot and being very active. And so I think sometimes we, with envy, are begrudgingly in our position in life and wishing that I wish I had that physique over there, or I wish I had that kind of hair over there, or I wish I had that skin color, or whatever it is, not accepting just the nature of who we are. There are things that we can improve and refine and cultivate that are malleable within us. But at our core, there is like this sort of programmed nature within us so that we can be the person that we are meant to be. So we have the experiences that we're meant to have. We bring forth those gifts that are uniquely us into the world. So understanding that, having acceptance of it, I think is something that can be really empowering when we finally like come into that place of just like, okay, it is in my nature. Like I'm never going to be super organized. I'm organized, but I'm never going to be as organized as some of my other friends that are like, everything is labeled. They know where everything is at all times. Everything looks orderly, and I could beat myself up. Clearly, this is not something I ever experienced. I could beat myself up for, my own nature and the way that I organize things, and always be begrudgingly that way and envious of someone else. Or I can just accept like, this just is what it is. I got to work with what I got. This is my nature, and so let me just lean into it.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Nice. Shall we move on to text 34?
I have a quick question with just like quick answer, because I want to get to text 34 too. 3 modes, is that the gunas?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will research that a little bit more, because I think we may have like somewhat talked about it, but
We have a little bit.
Yeah, good.
Sattva, the mode of goodness; Rajas, the mode of passion; and Tamas, the mode of lethargy or ignorance. You can kind of think of them as the primary colors, right? What are the primary colors? Red, yellow, and blue.
Mhm.
So when we think of the color red, what emotions come to mind? Anger, passion, right? So that's Rajas. And then you think of the color gold or yellow, what comes to mind? You're muted. Sunshine, happiness,
Happy.
joy, right? That's goodness. And then blue,
Sadness.
sadness, right? That sort of depression and stagnancy, cold. That's tamas. And so everything in our material world, everything that is material is influenced by these sort of modes of operation. Everything in nature is operating in those modes. Some are more sattvic, more in goodness, some are more passion, and some are just more inertia, is lethargy, inertia, or ignorance, in the dark, basically. So the modes of nature. Yeah. And really quickly too, about that question, what can repression accomplish? So when we do something that's obligatory, like we're following a rule because we should just do that thing, that's what makes us good, right? That is a type of repression. We're denying our nature. But when we do something because we have knowledge of why we should be doing it and some devotion to the process, that accomplishes something totally different when we are restraining or refraining or disciplining ourselves in some way, self-discipline, tapas, right? Okay.
Also, Ashriel, chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains the three modes. Very short chapter. You could just read the translations, like 25 verses. Krishna is very clear what it is, how they work, how they affect us.
I think
Maybe
that's the one that I'm on right now.
Maybe I'll put a workshop on the gunas. I used to give a talk about the gunas. It's heavily emphasized in Ayurveda as well, and all that stuff. So if you guys are interested, we can do a little workshop at some point on the gunas. Okay. Nice. All right, text 34.
There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. So is he saying you should not repress these?
But there are principles that basically there are ways in which we can work on subjugating them or being more in control of them rather than them being in control of us. There are, when I hear the word principles, I feel like guidelines, practices, ways that we can behave based on principles, values, morals, that will regulate our attachment and aversion.
So he's saying that there are ways to regulate, which is a good thing.
He's saying that if you are fully spiritualized, fully Krishna conscious, you don't need to follow rules to help uplift you. But if you're not, you haven't attained a perfect state of consciousness, then following specific rules and things, sadhana, helps elevate your consciousness. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Doing certain things, like you want to be a good yogi, you want to be a good philosopher, drinking all day and night, smoking weed, doing drugs won't help you, because it will keep your brain all diluted and you can't focus. So don't do drugs and drink alcohol, smoke. That's a rule. By not doing that, your brain is clear. You can focus on spiritual knowledge. Make sense? Eating anything, eating meat and all this stuff creates a negative energy to your mind and heart. So here's a rule. Don't eat meat. It doesn't mean that if you don't drink and if you don't eat meat, you're automatically spiritual. It doesn't mean that at all. But these things will help you if you're on that path. So there are rules that you can follow that will help you if that's your intention. But the rules on themselves don't help you. Like a prisoner is not automatically a yogi.
Because they're so renounced.
Yeah.
Well, it also doesn't mean that if you choose to not follow these principles that you are inherently a bad person, right? It's right, like a lot of religions teach us, like if you don't follow these rules, then you're a bad person, however they language that. It's not saying that either. I think it's good to always remember that the context of the advice he's giving is for the purpose of becoming self-realized, if that's what you want to do. And these aren't rules of like, this is how thou shalt not do this, otherwise I don't love you. That's not what Krishna's setting up here, right? These are like, if you want to progress, if you want to suffer less, if you want to have more peace of mind and more natural joy in your heart, you can achieve those things, you can have those things, but here's how you should do them. And if you do them this way, this is going to be the result. If you do them that way, then this will be the result. But ultimately,
gave me a great analogy. Let's say you had an experience. Let's say, for example, Dharma, how long have you lived in Long Beach?
20 years.
Let's say you've never been to Long Beach, never. And I say, Dharma, I would like to go to Long Beach. I would like to have a good afternoon. What can I do? And Dharma now gives me a set of rules to follow to have a great day in Long Beach. Go park here, go eat here, go to the bluff, look at the ocean, go get a coffee. Don't go down these roads, they're bad. Don't do this, but do this. And gives me a set of rules. If I follow them perfectly, I'm actually not guaranteed I'm going to have a beautiful day in Long Beach, but the probability is high, as opposed to me just showing up and trying to figure it out. I can also, on my own, as I'm having that day, augment the rules dependingly. What if she says you have to park there? That's full. Does that mean now my day's ruined because I have to park in that parking spot because Dharma said I do? No, I can park over there. It's not meant to be injunctions. It's a guide to help you if you need that help. And Krishna's saying, unless you're fully divine in your consciousness, you should have some guidance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How's that? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I have this underlined in the purport underneath this verse. The purport is just this particular teacher's explanation and perspective of these verses. And so it says, as long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under rules and regulations. Which I think I have that underlined because there's so much heavy emphasis sometimes, and maybe just from our conditioning and our programming from sort of Western Judeo-Christian culture of, deprivation. You have to deprive yourself of your human nature and just be godlike. Because that's the only way you get into heaven, which is an impossible task. I think being godlike is not impossible, but to be as perfect as God is impossible while we're in these human bodies. And so as long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed. Again, like understanding the nature of the season of your life. Ayurveda has a heavy emphasis around the cycles of life. The nature of a toddler is going to be different than the nature of somebody who's in their midlife. And so what a toddler needs to eat is different than what a 50-year-old needs to eat, and so, but as long as we're in a body, there is tending to the body that has to happen. And so I like that he's emphasizing here, like, yes, you're going to still engage in those things and take care of yourself, but under guidelines, under principles, under regulated practices that are supporting you in the direction that you want to evolve into. So I hope that's a helpful reminder. All right, text 35. I don't know if we should save this one for the next class because I really particularly like this verse, and I have a couple other verses written down that are interspersed throughout the Gita that hold this sort of similar notion. Maybe we can read it and end here and pick up next week with it so we can all kind of chew on it over the next week.
Leave it a minute early because I've got to grab my kids somewhere.
Azrael, did you read 3 verses?
I read 2. Do you want to read that? Do you want me to read that one?
I'll read it.
Okay.
It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous. This is just Krishna saying, just be you. Be you. It's better to fail as you than to try to succeed because you're trying to be somebody else and that it's dangerous. It's a strong word there, that it's dangerous. So we'll leave it at that, unless anybody has any comments. Maybe we'll pick up next week with this verse. So my challenge to you this week is to honor your nature of who you are, and within that sort of terrain, how can you spiritualize the material things that you're doing? You know, just keep that in mind as you go through your day. When you sit down to pay your bills and you go, ugh, how can you spiritualize even something like that?
That's not possible.
It is. It's totally possible. I look at my bills and I think this is me being a good parent and providing for my children and taking care of my children and having my household in such a way that my children's lives can and be peaceful and safe for them. And that's part of my service as a mom, to do that. And so I can even take something like that and remind myself that there's some spirituality that I can infuse into it, some offering of devotion and service. Makes my creator happy to know that I am treating his children well.
Nice. Very nice.
All right. Any closing conclusions or takeaways? We maybe have time for one before Jagai has to hop off here. There's a big takeaway somebody has gotten from today's class.
I'm just grateful. I'll be here next week. Thank y'all.
Awesome. All righty then. We're already chewing away at those things, huh? All right, well, good luck with your surrender this week. Remind yourself that you may not be a ninja, but you're in the training camp and that you are well on your way, practicing those ninja moves. All right, friends, we'll close with our closing mantras. Panchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Haribol.
Haribol. Have a great week. Good luck. We'll see you next time. Oh, I just almost have completely confirmed Radhika Das from the UK is going to be in California at the end of June, and he will be coming in to do kirtan for our kirtan in June. So for my teacher trainers, we have teacher training that night. So you'll just automatically be at the kirtan. So look forward to that. Very excited to have Radhika Das. And if you don't know him, you can check him out on Instagram, Radhika Dasa. He does some really nice programs. But all right, we'll see you next week at 1:30. Have a great week.